Welcome. I'm Tracy Poisner, and this is the Undeletable Dad podcast, a show for divorced or separated fathers. My job here is to guide you out of the thickets of parental alienation and to lead you across the threshold of the impossible to a real dimension where your children are securely held in the orbit of your love and influence. It's not a dream, it's reality, just waiting for you to breathe life into it. You're invited to work on a deeper level with me through our courses, group programs, or private mentorship by visiting undeletabledad.com. The term narcissist went from being relatively obscure to totally overused in what seems like about 5 minutes. I don't really love using that word because of how misunderstood it is and how easily it gets bandied about to basically describe anyone we don't like. But in fact, it's true that more and more people these days are displaying certain really difficult personality characteristics that make them very hard for the rest of us to deal with. In particular, when it comes to divorce, there's something about the dynamic of romantic love turning to hatred that brings out these particular characteristics in people. So much so that I think about 90% of divorced people would qualify their ex as a narcissist. Regardless of whether or not that's true in a clinical sense, we all need some help when it comes to dealing with the difficult people in our lives. So I'm very glad to introduce renowned psychoanalyst Dr. Leslie Austin, who's been a go-to expert on personality disorders for media outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and Bloomberg Television. She was a regular on Court TV with Nancy Grace and CBS's The Early Show with Harry Reasoner. I'm thrilled that she agreed to join us here to help unpack how the personality disorder we call narcissism plays out specifically in the divorce and custody realm, and how those of us who have someone like this in our lives can effectively deal with them and help our children to deal with the chaos they create. Here's Leslie to tell us more. I think there we go. We're live.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for being here. This is really amazing. I'm so glad to know you, and I want you to, well, as I told you 1 minute ago, my intention here is just to kind of pick your brain.
Well, it's nice that it's mutual. I'm so glad to know you too, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I really appreciate your inviting me.
Thank you.
Let's have some fun here helping
people. The first thing I want to know from you is I've been on your YouTube channel looking at all your old things. I want to know, how did you become the media darling of talking about, personality disorders or narcissism or whatever? You're the go-to person for the American media on this topic. How did that happen?
Well, I'm not quite sure. However, the background is I grew up in New York City. My parents took me to Broadway shows from the time I was 3.
Wow.
And I had a passionate love of theater, musicals and straight plays, which is amazing. So I have a background in theater and performance and media, and being in New York and I got a degree as a psychotherapist, but I also was acting, in school productions and all that. So I was very comfortable with performing, that part of it. But I was fascinated with what makes people tick. And over the years, what I've really developed my focus on and my expertise is I know what people are thinking. I know why they behave the way they do. And I know how to guide them to shift that so life gets better. And that happens whether it's in their personal lives or their professional lives, their jobs, throughout. And being in New York and meeting a lot of people, it was very easy for me to get introduced to some people who put me on some local TV shows. And I was just very comfortable with it. I had gotten trained in television when I was in college. We had a TV studio. So I was just very comfortable with it. And one day somebody introduced me to a producer at Court TV at the time. And they put me on with Nancy Grace, and I ended up being on with every host that was on Court TV. And I became one of Nancy's girls. She had a group of a few of us who talked about behavior. So I was on with all the sheriffs and detectives and police, and it was
So cool.
great. And Nancy was wonderful. And that led to doing a lot of the morning shows and some of the national networks. And the gods are very kind. I just find that very easy,
That's
very easy
wonderful.
for me. So I
So
love
cool.
talking with people and trying to help them really be happier and have a better life.
Yeah.
Seriously, really
And
be happier.
so I was going to say since then, but concurrent with them, you do a great deal of work at sort of the highest corporate levels,
Yes.
CEOs and senior executives of big, big companies who are often people who are difficult to work with, or who the boss finds them difficult to work with. Although
Yeah.
I know you've talked a lot about like star performers who are difficult personalities. They make a lot of money for the company, but they're very hard to work with. And that's kind of
Yeah.
your specialty.
They're too good to fire and too challenging to keep because they're abusive to the people around them and they quit and it costs the company a lot of money to get new people. And yet they make a lot of money. So they tolerate bad behavior.
Yeah.
Fortunately, this is less and less tolerated now. In fact, we're going to an extreme the other way, a little too far, constricting appropriate behavior, but it'll balance out in the long run. The thing is, being around a lot of those people particularly in New York City, where I was living at the time. I'm in Florida now, one form of crazy to another. um, what I learned was there was a lot of narcissism going around. And I'm using that word in a very specific context because it's overused in popular media now.
Yes, it is.
It's not that if anybody disagrees with you or is a bully, they're a narcissist. That's not accurate. A narcissist is a person who experiences the world as everything is an extension of themselves. So they're not able to connect to another person as separate from them. They only connect to the person in a way that they ask themselves, what do they do for me? Are they for me? Or they against me?
Right.
So we'll get back to that later. But I started seeing that pattern and I started working with some of those people. And then I happened to be driving on the highway one day in northern Manhattan, terrible winter, and I saw a little doggy get run over on the highway. And
Oh
I stopped,
no.
pulled him over. Yeah, Jeep front and back wheels ran over this little Chihuahua kind of dog.
Oh.
And I stopped and picked him up, which was crazy because there's no shoulder on that road, but I picked him up. And I named Henry because I was on the Henry Hudson Parkway. And after a lot of surgery and acupuncture
Oh,
and a lot of training, he was a crazy dog. He was a fear biter.
he
He was
lived.
aggressive. He had been abused.
But he lived.
He lived.
Oh my
He
goodness.
lived a very long and thriving
Oh,
life. His worst physical thing was that he would get very achy in the cold winter, and I would
oh
take him for
my gosh,
acupuncture,
that's
sing
incredible.
mantra into his ear, and then he'd be fine.
Excuse
He'd
me,
run
my
away.
little dog is bugging to get out the door. I'm gonna let him out here, and then I'm okay. Now I'm back. That's an incredible story.
Well, my clients don't know this, but Henry changed their lives because in having to understand how to modify the behavior and train aggressive fear-biting behavior of a terrified dog, you can't negotiate. You can't be logical. It is completely behavioral and energetic. And I
I
was
love that.
determined, and I got good advice to have 100% positive reinforcement. There was no punishment. There was either stopping the connection or rewarding the good behavior. Well, guess what? I'm not being facile here. Those principles are core to changing the behavior of abusive people, where you make them aware that the behavior that they're showing is not getting them what they want and it's hurting other people. Now, at the beginning, they don't care that it's hurting other people. They only care about they're not getting what they want.
Yeah.
But if I can work with a very senior executive to get smarter and more strategic about what it is they really want to accomplish and teach them different behavioral moves and tactics, people respond differently, and then people don't get abused
Oh, this is
as
so great.
much.
And it's so well, obviously I asked you to come and talk to my audience, well, to just kind of um, eavesdrop while we're having this
Mhm.
conversation, because this is such a huge issue in the post-divorce world,
Oh
where
boy,
you
never.
cannot fire some. I mean, you divorce this person because you can't find a way to get along with them. But you have to get along with them for the rest of your life because you have children together. There is no way to, just disconnect yourself completely, because it doesn't serve the children, where we have these like polarized households that do everything so differently from each other.
Right.
Almost the more you go in one direction, the more the other household will pull away in the other direction. So it's an option in your interpersonal connections to just cut someone off that you can't deal with.
Yeah.
And in this context, we are stuck having to deal with somebody. So I just love that because that's what I was going to say, that negotiating and logic doesn't work. And we're going to have a little conversation in a little while about the archetypes, which is the way that I love to see things. Obviously, you are very well schooled about that kind of approach. But what can you say off the cuff where I don't even like to use the term narcissist, because as you said, it's so overused, but this difficult, demanding, self-absorbed or self-centered person who can't see other perspectives is using somebody's children, someone else's, somebody's children as kind of hostages to their, like to reinforce their outlook. They have this possibility of really influencing someone else, dominating them by the control that they have over their children. What can you say about that?
Okay, so let's untangle that and sort it out a little bit. It's not really that they want to how do I say it? Let me back up. What's going on here is the core motivation of someone with that kind of narcissistic personality. And I don't like labeling people narcissists, putting them in a box. It's a personality, it's a structure, it's a pattern. Their view of the world is win or die. You're with me or you're not.
Yeah.
I win or I die. Now, what you need to understand is underneath that behavior is absolute existential terror and the most profound insecurity you can imagine, or you can't even imagine if you're not that personality.
Right.
So I actually have a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy for somebody who lives in a hell like that inside themselves. However, all the compassion and empathy in the world does not excuse the bad behavior.
Right.
There's a clear distinction. So, in my world, I would hope they deal with those issues. So using the children as tools or manipulations towards the ex, it's actually not about the kids, it's about winning.
Of course.
So it could be the kids, it'll be the money, it'll be the house, it'll be their mutual associates or friends, it'll be the in-laws, the parents, the job. It can be anything. The driving energy underneath is winning and punishing. And win or I die, I win or I die. You're with me, my way or the highway. You're with me or you're not.
I mean, this feels absolutely right, and I'm in the sense I have a strong intuitive sense that leads me to also feel very innately why someone else, what they're feeling, why they're behaving the way that they're feeling.
Yeah.
But from my vantage point, or from where I work with the other party, who is the one who is being imposed on or hampered in some way, we don't get to actually work with that other person. I often guide them in how to word their emails, or how, we'll work on that with a view to, as you said, like supporting someone in a way that would soften their stance.
Right.
But how do you deal with someone who's in that win or die kind of survival space?
Right. So there are a couple of things that are very hard concepts to grasp at first. But once someone really understands them, it helps them cope a lot. And I've worked with a number of women and one or two men who are the ones who are being abused in divorces. In a couple of cases, there was a woman who was actually in physical danger.
Mm.
I don't do much of that work now because, to be honest, I get too indignant. It's too hard on me. But I talk to people about it. The mindset, this is bizarre. When someone treats you that way and they have that kind of a personality, it's actually not personal. On one level, they will do it with everybody. It's not about you. You are invisible to them. And right under that, it's deeply personal. So it's this split. So the recipient, the person who's being bullied or maltreated by a narcissistic personality type person, is going to feel like they're going crazy because on the one hand, it's so personal, and on the other, it feels like, where is this coming from? It has no sense of reality.
Yeah.
I just had a text from a client this morning. Her husband attacked her viciously. He's trying to stop drinking, and she's starting to file for divorce after many, many years. And he attacked her viciously because she didn't tell him the kids were sick and staying home from school. And nobody knows why he went crazy about that. And then 10 minutes later, he texted her again and said, I love you. I hope you have a good morning. And she texted me and said, am I going crazy? What's going on here? And I said, it's not about you.
Yeah.
Now she's learning that. She's doing the work. That's hard for someone to grasp because you have such hurt feelings.
Yeah.
You're shamed, you're humiliated, you're abused, you're treated very, very badly. It's really hard to take care of yourself. You have to understand, on one level, it is not personal, it's their pathology.
Right.
And it is a pathology. It's a dysfunctional behavior. There's nothing you can do about it to change it, except one thing. And that is, and this is where you can affect the relationships a lot. And I know you help people with this. You have to be very strategic. And in every communication and every email, you have to be careful with the language, not to tell them something they don't know, because they hate surprises. So even if you're telling them something new, the phrase, I'm sure you already know this, but
Right.
has to preface, this is happening.
Yeah.
The defenses down. Because if you just say, by the way, this is happening, they'll attack you and say no and fight it. I'm sure you already know this, but this is happening. So no surprises. You must give them a win. Be strategic and be smart, and find some way to phrase or say something so that it feels like you're not setting a boundary or being firm in most cases. And we'll get to boundary setting in a minute, but give them a win.
Yeah.
Ask a question that you're okay with either answer. So like one thing I've taught people who work with very narcissistic or difficult bosses, challenging people, is never ask a yes or no question.
Mm-hmm.
Because the answer will be no. They can't help themselves. Even if they want to say yes, biologically, they have to say no. So what do? You go to them with two options in your mind, and either one you can live with. Let's say you like A a little bit better, but you're okay if they choose B. You go to them and basically you have in your mind, oh, great, wise one. That's the attitude you want to convey to them, like they're smarter. Could you help me think this through?
Yeah.
I'd like your take on this. Would you mind telling me what you think? I've got A here or I've got B here. And to be honest, now remember, we want A. To be honest, I'm slightly favoring B.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, because you're favoring B, they'll choose A.
This is so smart.
And when they choose A, they will change one little thing and claim credit. Happens at work. Happens.
And you have to let them do that. This is so.
Absolutely.
I hear this so many times. Like
program it.
It was my idea, and she took my idea, and now I'm like,
program
okay,
it.
But you wanted it.
Program it. Set it up. Be smart. The only way you will get a different response is if you behave differently. When you train as a psychotherapist and you go through couples counseling, or even just as a therapist, when you're with a client, they teach you that people organize each other is the language they use. My behavior as a therapist, when I was doing therapy 1,000 years ago, My behavior as a therapist will organize how you react. What you do, how you react to me is going to organize how I respond to you. It's a natural byplay. So you want to be strategic and smart and plan. There's like, I do a little narcissism 101 thing. I used to have a pamphlet. Maybe I'll send it to you so you can give it to
Yeah.
people. I'll dig it out.
Yeah,
But
that'd
it
be
was
great.
like really narcissism 101, like 4 or 5 steps, how to respond. Do not ever say no if you can help it. Sometimes you will. And when you set boundaries, if they are talking to you abusively or ranting and raving, and you just can't deal with it, what you say is, I'm willing to talk to you about anything if we can talk respectfully. I'm leaving now. Let's take this up again later.
That's
But
great.
then you have to leave.
Yeah.
You have to stop the conversation.
Yeah.
And if they rant and rave, you have to stay as calm as possible. This takes self-control.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't, when you yell at me like that, I go dumb. I can't hear. I can't deal with what you're saying. Happy to talk about anything with you if we can speak respectfully. Let's revisit this later.
That's so
Now,
great.
all these things I'm
Priscilla
saying.
just commented she just loves that phrase. I think you already
Oh,
know
hi,
this, but
Priscilla.
that's a great way. That's a great way of dealing.
These strategies, these behaviors are hard to learn at first. And every person I've ever worked with to help them learn these is ticked off and frustrated. Why do I have to do this?
Yes.
Why do I have to twist
No, why
myself
do
into
I
a
have
pretzel
to do
because of
this?
them? Why can't they just be normal? Well, the answer is they're not going to treat you well. They're just not. So they're speaking French, you're speaking Greek. There's no way in hell they will ever learn Greek. You want to communicate? Learn French.
Yeah.
You want to connect with them? Learn their behavior patterns and I say this in the clean sense of the word, manipulate it. Work with it. Manipulate as in shape.
Yes.
Not punish.
Yes. Yeah.
So be smart. Once you get the groove, after a while, these kinds of reactions become second nature and life gets easier. So they will only attack you, 4 out of every 5 times eventually. And then sooner or later, 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
They can't help themselves.
That's so great. That's so great. And this is so close. This strategy makes me think of something that I recommend to my stepmom listeners, actually, with respect to, managing small children. This is something that, we, all of us who were mothers did maybe unconsciously at one point, but, you say, would you like your sandwich with the crusts on or the crusts off? You don't say, what do you want for lunch? Or do you want a sandwich? You give this binary choice and you're okay with either choice. Or you put a plate of options in front of a child to pick from. And of course, all of the options are things that you more or less approve of.
Right.
And then they get to pick and they have some personal agency and they feel good about themselves and they don't feel like they're being pushed around. So this is kind of the adult version of that. And I think it's brilliant.
And this also actually extends into many other areas as well. One of my business mentors over the years taught very early on for extremely high-end consulting in big corporations, very senior executives. Don't ever come in with a proposal with a price because you're giving them a yes or a no. You come into a proposal, you describe the situation, you give them, what it's about and what the outcomes will be and how it'll do it, how they'll know it's successful. And then you give them 3 options. Option 1 is this price for this much. Option 2 adds this, and option 3 adds this. Right. And when they come to you and say, that's great, I'd like option 3, can you, give it to me for less money? The answer is, sure, what would you like me to take out?
Right.
Because you're talking about value.
Right.
So when you're doing that with kids, you're doing the same principle. Or in a divorce negotiation, like I just said, with a challenging personality, give somebody options. You want to stay away from yes or no, particularly with difficult personalities, because the reflex is to say no and then kind of look at it again later.
Well, and here's another element, which is where I've been helpful to clients, sort of strategizing for court. not because I'm a lawyer, but lawyers know about winning. Like your lawyer's job is to get you the best possible deal. And the
Right.
problem in a divorce negotiation where there's custody involved in children is that the loser can make your life hell forever. The
Yes.
loser has to walk away winning something. And
Right.
lawyers don't understand how to do that because this is not a situation that really is suitable for courtrooms to be handling where you're talking about
Right.
personal relationships and family life and children. This is not a chattel kind of situation. But I have been with clients discussing how do we give in this case, the ex-wife, a sense that she came away from this winning something? Because if
Exactly.
she doesn't feel that she won, you are going to be no better off after you have a divorce agreement written than you are
Absolutely.
right now.
In fact, it'll be worse
Yeah,
because you'll have legal constraints on you for what you can and can't do.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
it was completely eye-opening to my client
Mhm.
to um, to have this kind of direction about here's what you're going to say in order to, again, it's kind of, oh, wise one, oh, great one,
Yeah.
to be finding ways to phrase everything from the point of view of what a good mother she is, or why the children need, of course, to have this much contact with her. Like
Yeah.
that you have to be putting those kind of things before the court so that she
Yeah.
feels seen and flattered and appreciated and
And
like,
phrases like, I want to be sure we work something out that works for both of us.
right.
The us and the we phrasing.
Yeah.
You may see on one level, um, the person who's being badly treated may not want to say we because they're so ticked off they just want to get away from that person.
They
However,
don't want to be a we
strategically,
anymore. Yeah.
but you will always be a we. If you have
Yeah,
kids, you will always be a we. If
exactly.
you don't have kids, it's different. Then you're talking about assets. That's another story. And those eventually can be separated. But if you have kids, you will always be a we. And so you need to get into the mindset that we is the key to connecting somehow to give some kind of a win so that you can live with what the result is. Now, when I got trained as a mediator many, many years ago, the most important part of that training was to impress upon the people who were in the mediation that it's not about winning when you're in mediation. It's about what can you live with that will work. And when we used to take each party to the mediation privately to find out what they really wanted and what was going on, the thing I would say over and over was, you're probably not going to get everything you want. What can you live with?
Mm.
What if you what do you really need to walk out of here and be okay? Maybe not ideal, but okay. So that's a very important principle. What can you live with? And when you're going through the divorce, after the divorce, the question is always, what can you live with? Now, when one partner polarizes the kids against the other partner,
Mm.
which is a vicious, terrible thing to do. Again, on one level, you have to understand that that person is so intensely insecure, terrified, and angry that they will harm their kids to win.
Yeah.
They're that
This is
emotionally
where I
blind.
work. This is where
Yeah,
I work. Like it's so prevalent. You
right.
just can't imagine. I mean, if half of the marriages, ballpark, half of the marriages are breaking up, um, and 80% of children of divorce are experiencing some degree of this alienating behavior,
Sure.
right? It means that, somewhere north of a third of all the children in the Western world, at least, right, are having this experience of being
Right.
polarized between their parents. It's so dramatic and so prevalent.
Again, I'm absolutely sure this is how you work with people, knowing you. But what needs to be done there is that the person who is being ganged up on or polarized against, at least for the first couple of years, has to be the bigger person.
Yep.
There's a short-term devastating hurt that's involved.
Yep.
Okay. And we'd admit that it's just awful, but you never speak ill of your ex in front of your kids. You do not try to polarize your kids against the abusive ex.
Yeah.
And what you say things are phrases like, if it's a man, your mom has her way of expressing things, and there are two sides to every story.
Yeah.
And some of the things your mom talks to you about aren't really, as kids, you shouldn't be dealing with that. So let's just go have ice cream.
Yeah.
Tell me what's bothering you. Tell me what's upsetting you. Let me support you. Let
Yeah.
me, I love you. I care about you, all that. But don't dump adult things on kids, and never
Absolutely.
badmouth the polar. Mom's upset. Mom is having difficulty. She's having, she can be very expressive. I'm sorry you feel upset. I'm sorry she said those things about me. I love
Yeah.
you. Let's go have a nice time.
Yeah.
But you don't defend yourself. You don't explain. You don't attack.
Yeah. I often say your mom is allowed to be mad at me, and that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to be mad at me. We don't have
Right.
to be mad at each other.
Right.
It's
Exactly. Perfect. I
I
saw
wanted.
that
Oh, sorry.
Priscilla
You go
asked
ahead.
in the
Oh,
chat.
Frizella had another question, right?
Yeah, she said, what if the yelling is in a text? Well, that's even easier. You write back and say, I can't have this conversation unless we can speak respectfully. I'm going offline now. Let's talk later.
Yeah.
Same thing. Text is even easier because then you stop responding. I'm not going to reply now. When we can speak respectfully, we can talk.
That's so great.
And then don't reply.
Yeah.
Have self-control. It's not easy
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, and it's one of the ways, I mean, of course, we're having a larger discussion here than just divorce. So
Yeah.
that's a perfect answer. But in the divorce context, it's one of the reasons I'm so big on using one of these co-parenting apps, Talking Parents or Family Wizard, because all the conversations are court ready. That's the idea of it. You can't add or delete things. Everything is time stamped. You can see that it was read. Somebody can't say they didn't get it. And that when someone is being watched, even theoretically, it's not like it's not like the app is hooked up to the court and a judge is watching your text. But if you ever end up in a court situation, every single word that each of you has written is ready. It's in a court ready evidence document, and it does tend to minimize the abusive language.
That's wonderful. See, I don't know about those, but I think that's great because I often advise clients when they're dealing with somebody who's abusive to make sure that they archive texts and emails and voice messages if they can.
Yeah.
Take them offline and literally put them on a hard drive off their computer. Print
Yeah.
out the texts if you have to, so that you have an archived copy, so that if you do have to bring it into court, you have a record of a contemporaneous record of what went on.
This is so, I mean, the apps are so great because they have the added feature of not being the other person can't say, well, of course I got angry because you had sent me 6 texts in a row, and the other person leaves out the negative things that they had done. So it's also a way to engage with someone in a polite and reasonable way where they have to respond to you either politely or reasonably or ignore you completely. And that is a win-win for you because,
and I was going to say, if somebody refuses to participate in the app at all, it says something.
It says something about their willingness to, co-parent in a civil way. I want to talk a little bit about archetypes because that's what I'm crazy for that, right? So the system that I'm using, and which I have combined with the Bach flowers, and I know we've just talked a little bit otherwise about this. It's something that you know about from way back. Bach flowers are not something new, right? That are energetic medicine that helps us to embody the positive archetype energy that we want, like actually in your body, because so often better, right? Like what you said, it's so hard to be the better person, or it's so frustrating and it's hard. Like that frustration happens in your body. And even if you know in your mind, it's not about me, I should be the bigger person, here's what I should say, like your body overrides that understanding and causes you to respond, your emotions are running the show, really. And I would say it's shadow archetypal energy
Yeah.
that's running the show. So there are only 4 shadow archetypes, these negative ones, which are the prostitute, nothing to do with sex, but that has to do with making the wrong kind of sacrifice for what you want, right? So in the sense of the narcissistic parent, let's say, they would sacrifice their own children in the interest of getting this win, which is
Yes.
not what their higher self would tell them
And
to
their
do,
own
right?
soul.
Exactly. And there's the child, which is about entitlement and thinking that everything revolves around them and everything should just come to them without any real effort on their part. There's the victim. And in the case of the narcissist, we'll say all of these archetypes present with a kind of bully version of them, right? Like the victim, as you said before, it's the same energy as the bully. The bully is operating from the same deficit of a feeling of power to accomplish anything or resources. And then there is the saboteur, who is sort of the know-it-all and who has to be right about everything and who is married to evidence or logic or reasoning, even if they warp it to their own purpose, right? So I had a look before our call because I just thought, which Bach flowers would we like if you just said narcissist, like which flowers would you grab for that, you know? So there are 3 that come immediately to mind. And excuse me while I turn off my heater before this room turns into a sauna. Okay. There are 3 that jump to mind, which are beech, heather, and vine.
Okay.
So this is for the actual, oh, thanks. Frizella likes the archetypes. I'm so glad because I'm like so into this. So beech is a remedy that is the know-it-all. They know better for everybody. They're giving everybody else advice, and not just advice, but directions and controlling. Somebody who's judgmental, who's strict, and requires like discipline and order around them to feel okay, right? So I put all of these flowers into 2 shadow archetypes that sort of blend together into a new category, let's say. So beech is a combination of saboteur and prostitute, somebody who it's all about what they know. And it's all about being right and what they know. And then that the prostitute side of, I would say, forcefully acting out their insecurity. Maybe that's the way to say it.
Yeah.
And heather is the consummate child remedy of the Bach flowers. Heather is a remedy that wants attention, that needs to be the center of attention, and they don't care what they have to do to get the attention. So this is very, very common in the ex-spouse. I'm going to say like the bio mom, because my audience tends to be dads, right? Who does not want to be written out. She doesn't want her character to be written out of the show. Like she just wants to continue to be in this drama, whatever role that she has to play. And so she'll do whatever it takes to continue to have your attention.
Yes. The level of existential shame is intolerable that people like that feel. And there are a whole number of very prominent politicians active right now in the global environment, who shall remain unnamed, where you can see these characteristics. And in some sense, it's almost cartoonish how extreme they are. It's laughable, and it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
Because there's an effect on the mass media. And I want to say, I hope I'm not derailing you from the remedies. I think it's important, and the archetypes, I think it's really important you're talking about those, because the influence of the internet, mass media, mainstream media, social media can be glorious, and it's also very pernicious when it displays 24/7 these kinds of personalities who our kids take on as role models because they see them on
Yeah.
TV
Yeah.
and they're on the newspapers and they're talked
Yeah.
about all the time. There are certain names now you can't wake up in the morning without hearing it 30 times a day, and you don't want to.
Yeah.
People in the news. And it's a very dark energy. So
Mhm.
it's incumbent upon us to look for the kinds of remedies that you're doing. And I'll just do a quick little detour if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, please.
Quantum physics verifies that thought and emotions are energy, measurable energy. And Einstein called a phenomenon in quantum physics that he didn't understand, but he knew about, spooky action at a distance. And
Yeah.
that is, once a particle connects to any other particle,
Yeah.
the minute anything happens, it's observed, it moves, it changes. The exact same thing happens to the other particle simultaneously, no matter where it is in the universe. This is measured and proven.
Yeah.
Therefore, how does that boil down to us? Your thoughts are energies. Your emotions are energies. They absolutely affect your physical body. They actually affect the other person and they affect the environment around you. So the remedies that you're using, Bach flower remedies and homeopathic remedies and many other media for healing are vibrational energy healing. And they are more core than taking a prescription medication, which is symptomatic. They go to the cause level, which is energy. And if we
Absolutely.
were to heal this out of control narcissism, it would be because your energy is different and the person doesn't have that conflicting energy to bounce
To push
against.
back
And
on, that's it.
I just want to say one last thing. Narcissism in itself is not bad, wrong, evil, or negative. We all have narcissistic traits. We all
That's
have a
true.
self. We all have an ego. It needs to be in balance. The most positive aspect of a truly narcissistic person is I can lead you. You are in safe hands. Let me take you to the good place. And we've had a number of world leaders who were very high minded, who had to be narcissistic in order to lead.
Yeah.
That's the positive end. The ones we're talking about are at the far end of the
Right.
negative.
Right.
So I don't want to condemn that personality trait.
Yeah.
You need
No,
to be in
that's
balance,
this
healthy.
is so true. And the reason that this energetic approach is so fundamental is because the physics is the foundation of chemistry. All of
Absolutely.
chemistry is
Yes.
about positive and negative charges that hold things together. It's
Yes.
there, you're not full of miniature Velcro holding your bits together, right?
Right.
It's all positive, negative, positive, negative. And we repel things by, positive, positive, repel each
Yes.
other or whatever. So clearly the way to rewrite your inner software, your programming is on an energetic level. By the
Yes.
time you're at the level of chemistry, you're only dealing with the results of your
Yeah.
program.
The symptoms of the outer
The
layer.
symptoms
You know,
are
I
the
had a
way
funny thought.
to see it.
I had a funny thought while you were talking. It's no wonder that we call some people that we say they have magnetic personalities
That's right.
because they're drawing us to them, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what charisma is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the magnetism of being aligned so that
Right.
literally all of your little electrons are lined up and pointing in the same direction. Like you are in line with your higher purpose. And that makes
Mm.
you magnetic. It
Yep.
literally it literally does. So thank you for that. That's very
Sure.
cool.
This is fun.
So the third remedy for the controlling person, we know they're not going to take it, right? I'm just giving you, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that it helps even to understand people. I love working like this because everybody thinks about a remedy and they say, oh my goodness, I know someone like that. But it helps you to understand them in terms of a vibration that could just be shifted with something. So Vine is the true controlling, dominating uh, personality of the Bach flowers. Somebody who's like a tyrant and who expects unquestioned obedience, you know?
Hmm.
And that is the child who has this entitled energy combined with the bully victim version, who is just transmuting their victim mindset. You know, it's a compensation for feeling like a victim to behave like a bully, basically. So go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Mhm.
This is kind of an interesting idea. So, what would happen if the dad who's being abused or the woman who's being abused were to take the bottles of those 3 remedies and hold them, just make contact with the bottles, and work on clearing and balancing their own energy when they're not taking them, but holding them vibrationally, so that they're actually working with their own, balancing their own energy to those. And I'm holding a bottle of essential oil here as an example, so that they're balancing to the energy of those remedies that are the issue, without actually dealing with the person. I would bet vibrationally that would help some.
That is a totally legitimate way of working.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've been a homeopath for more than 25 years. So I know that there is a school of thought about a person taking the remedy that someone else in your family needs, you know,
Yes.
to shift the family constellation energy in a certain way. So it is absolutely legitimate to, as you said, to hold or to take or whatever, but like that there is some clearing that happens.
Well, it triggers on mirror neurons. If you're doing that and you're in a certain state, the other person, you know, or mirror neurons will interact with the other person. They'll experience some of that. Well, that's kind of a, you know, sometimes with even the very senior executives, I will have them do an exercise where I want them to be the other person that they're having problems with, or I'll want them to do a little symbol of them and talk to them before they actually talk to them in real life, to work it through first, to experience the energy, but not directly with the person. So I guess that's a version of this.
You know, it's
and sometimes when I first do it, they think I'm crazy, but then when they see it really works, they start doing it all the time.
Well, what's incredibly powerful, and it's very similar to what you just said, is an exercise called flow writing that I originally learned when I took a course in animal communication, of all things. But the guy was amazing who taught this course. And basically, you sort of write, you open a conversation on paper where you're writing your thoughts and you're just listening for what comes back and writing it down. So to have a conversation with another person. And I have had clients do this with their difficult ex-spouse with quite miraculous results. It's really pretty cool what people can say to each other on this sort of multi-dimensional way that you couldn't have this conversation in real life because everybody's shadow is active and there's so much at stake. But when we just sort of go beyond this realm, it is possible to communicate in another way.
That's been validated in other areas as well. I was trained as a Gestalt therapist, and there's what Fritz Perls called chair work, where you go back and forth, and you are the other person, and you talk to you, and it's very powerful. And I also learned a technique that originally was called trance healing therapy, where you sit quietly all on your own, alone in a quiet room, and you imagine, you know, like the infinity symbol, the figure 8, the 2 loops. You're in one of them, and the other one you put the person you're having the difficulty with. This is also based, I think, loosely on some Native American practice as well. And when they do dream work, I think from the Sonoy Indians, but I'm not sure. Gosh, I'm going back into the archives from a long time ago. It's a little dusty. But you put the other person in the other loop, and you talk to them from your heart, you know, silently. Or you can say it out loud if you're entirely alone. They're not physically there. And then you wait and you listen, and you'd be stunned what comes back at you from that other person in this meditation state. And then you respond. You have this amazing dialogue. And people often find that it dramatically changes their relationships in real life, and that a lot of what came through was very accurate stuff that they didn't
Yeah.
realize was there.
Yeah.
Very so many domains this is validated.
There are so many levels of things that we don't know, and there are so many ways to work, and people who feel so boxed in a corner or so helpless or powerless. Tomorrow I'm doing a session on being powerless, so we have so much power that we don't know about it to work in ways that aren't obvious, or in a more invisible realm to actually shift things. So I'm going to
This is really fun, Tracy. I think you and I could go on for hours.
We could totally. Well, I was just going to quickly talk about the person who's being controlled archetypally.
Sure.
From the prostitute point of view, they are also making the wrong sacrifices because they don't know how to stand behind themselves. And the child archetype fears consequences, right? This is the I don't want to rock the boat syndrome. They also, the child wants things to be fair. Oh my goodness, this is such a hindrance to moving forward in this kind of dynamic. This idea that it's not fair, right? And it has to be fair. That's a huge stumbling block. The victim doesn't have any boundaries, doesn't know how to make them.
Right.
And the saboteur, in the sense of the person who is the abused person, needs things to make sense. And they're, stuck in this world of logic and reason. So the three remedies that came to mind for the dominated person are Centauri, Willow, and Sweet Chestnut. So I could talk about those on and on, but Centauri is basically a doormat kind of personality who gets taken advantage of, and Willow is somebody stuck in resentment, who's into like blaming and pointing fingers, and that feels comforting. They would rather point fingers than take responsibility for your own part in maintaining this conflict, even if it feels to you like it's 100% the other person who's aggressing you. Like you said before, you are participating on the level of your mirror neurons, even when you don't understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
Right? And Sweet Chestnut is a remedy for this state of total despair, emptiness, hopelessness, losing faith in life. So it just to be able to access those remedies to get this higher state of energy, to be able to flow through your body, to be able to host a higher frequency from which to make your moves, from which to make your decisions. It's so critical to get out of that shadow place when you're dealing with somebody who seems to have so much power and who undermines everything you do, and who, causes so much ongoing anguish and really does get your attention. We have to have new tools, better, stronger tools for being able to, I'm not even going to say resist, but like to operate on another level where it doesn't touch you anymore.
I would say shift the dynamic.
Exactly.
Shift the dynamic. And one of the most powerful things you, as the quote unquote victim or the person being abused or disadvantaged, can do is to change your mindset. And that means redefining what's a win and what's fair.
Oh, I love
and what's
that.
a win and what's fair go to a deeper level than transactional. The win is as peaceful, as stable a relationship with the ex as possible, that is as least harmful and maybe even okay for the kids.
Yeah.
That's a win. What's fair is getting out as unscathed as possible, because there is no winning, there is no logic, there is no resolution. And the more you come from these higher minded, behaviorally correct, more intelligent strategies, over time, the relationship eases. It really does.
Yeah.
Because the principle there is, if you're not giving them the resistance, the upset, the juice for them to react to, if you become pleasant and neutral as much as possible, and they don't get a charge out of going after you, because of the composition of their personality structure, they're going to get bored,
That's right.
start dating someone else, go attack someone else, but they're not getting the satisfaction of winning from you because you're being amenable. Life gets easier, and they turn their attention to someone else. But it takes time. That's a win.
That is so great.
That's a win.
That is so great. Listen, thank you for this. And we could talk forever, because I'm just like, you're a treasure trove. This is fantastic. Thank you for doing this.
I really loved it, Tracy. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
And I would love to, if anybody's listening to this who wants in particular to learn more about the Bach flower stuff that I'm talking about, you can go to bachfloweralchemy.com to join my private members portal. If you can't get hold of me there, gosh, I'm everywhere here. I think I have for now, I'll show the Undeletable Dad address. That's my email. Feel free to get in touch with me. Leslie, where can people find you?
My website is Leslie at leslieaustin.com.
leslieaustin.com. Perfect.
Yeah. That's probably the easiest place. I am on LinkedIn.
Great.
Dr. Leslie Austin, you can find me there.
Awesome. Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, a real joy. Blessings to you and everyone watching and listening at any time and space and time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was brilliant. Maybe I'll run a special Undeletable Dad workshop to sharpen your tools for dealing with a narcissist. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, and I'll announce it right here when I have that ready to go. Meanwhile, you can access private coaching and mentorship with me if you're ready to work outside the box and reestablish contact with your kids, even if they don't want to hear from you. Reach out to Tracy at undeletabledad.com for a phone call to explore how working with me one-to-one outside the system can do what court and counseling have not been able to accomplish for your family. Thanks for listening. Your kids thank you too.